The stabbing attack on a children's holiday club in Southport has shocked all of us. 3 young girls, 7-year-old Elsie Dot Stancombe, 6-year-old Bebe King, and 9-year-old Alice Dasilva Aguiar, died after a knife attack at their dance studio. Now, 5 other children and 2 adults are still in a critical condition in hospital. As adults, it's hard enough to take in heartbreaking news like this, but should we be telling our children about events like this? And if so, how do we even start? How do you go about it? Perhaps you've already started this conversation with your children. Do give us a call and let us know how that's went. 0207 862 2222 is the number. If you've got any questions or if you want to share your own stories about maybe tragedies in the past and how you've talked to your children about those, it's such a tough subject to broach with children because you don't want to take away their innocence. No. You've got 2 boys, Lizzie. Have you had to do this in the past?
I have, actually. And I was actually my boy actually had a day off school, not well, and we actually were watching the 9/11. It was on the news. And so horrific, because I just remember that day so well, just being in total shock, standing still going, oh my God, you can't believe what you're watching. And I literally thought, do I take him away to stop him watching this? And I thought, well, actually, no, because he will learn about this. At school, people will talk about it.
How old was he?
And he was 7.
7? OK, so
I believe, as a parent, you are an emotional role model to your children. I think it's important that they do know about these things, but done in the right way, because children obviously have to digest it different, and you have to be reassuring and comforting. But I think you need to be honest and do it in the right way, because they will hear it at school, they'll hear it if they're on social media. Yeah. And I think as a parent, your role is to do it in a way which will comfort them, but be truthful at the same time, but do it in the right way. And I did that, and I think it was the right decision, because when he went back into school, everyone was talking about it. They were doing masses and prayers for the victims, and I think I did the right thing as a parent.
Do you, Henry, remember when you were a child anything tragic happening and how your family dealt with it?
It's hard to remember because, I mean, it's been a long time since I was a child, but I remember my parents didn't spare us. I mean, you know, they came from Ghana, they had quite a tough approach to life, and they didn't paint a picture of a world as they would want it to be, or as we would like to imagine it.
Do you think that was the right approach for you?
I think so, especially during those times, and especially now, where it's hard to avoid any of these things, especially through social media. Children have phones from a very, very early age, and particularly when a terrible thing has happened to children of their own age, it might hit them more hard. It might make them worry about their own safety, because it's happened not to a 50-year-old or a 30-year-old, but to a 6-year-old, a 7-year-old, a 9-year-old. And just as in the States, you know, when you've got terrible tragedies like Sandy Hook and Uvalde and, you know, those awful massacres of children in that country. We've had Dunblane here, we've had some other tragedies, if you look back through the archive. And children have to be told, I don't know what the right ages will hear, I'm sure, from our child psychologists, but they need to feel safe, secure, and optimistic about life, but be very, very aware that whether you call it good and evil, there are forces, really negative forces, rare, but they're there, and they need to be prepared for it.
And it's a more dangerous world, and I think they need to be made aware. And my mother is from Southport, and it's a sleepy seaside town, and the whole community are in total shock. I mean, it is so dreadful, but I think it's so important that, you know, the little ones do know about this. Yeah. However tragic it is.
We're seeing the vigil here last night. Was your mum at the vigil, or...?
No, but my family members were there, yeah. And it is just so shocking. And you don't expect this to happen at all in this country, but...
But maybe that's what you focus on, just looking at the number of people out there pulling together and coming in grief, I suppose. Other children there as well, so they've had to talk to their kids about the situation. I wonder whether that's what you focus on, the community coming together and the positive aspects that are out, and try and pull that out of the story. I don't know.
Yeah, I think that's how you frame it. You tell them, there's some terrible things that happen in the world, but look at all this love. Yeah. Look at people coming together to support. And, you know, and you have to let them know at a very early age. I remember now just thinking, I must have been about 4 or 5 years old, being told by my mum, don't take things from strangers. And here's why. Because sometimes people would drive alongside you, you know, you're a tiny child going to school, in their car, and try and get you to come into the car. This is going back into the 70s.
They're warnings.
And we'd be told, don't take sweets from strangers for that reason.
Don't talk to strangers. But I think out of something awful and so tragic as this, there will be some good. And I think you see that support and community together, they will grasp that.
OK, we're joined now by clinical psychologist and author Dr Sarah Mundy. Welcome, Sarah, to the show. Thank you for joining us with this one. It's such a hard thing to navigate as a parent, particularly if this is maybe the first tragedy that you've had to deal with in terms of communicating it with your child. I mean, do we have to communicate these things with our children if they don't ask us about them?
We don't have to. No, we are parents. We are the ones who make decisions around our children and what we share with them. But I agree with Henry and Lizzie that they are likely to find out. It is a world where there is lots of information readily available. I heard a story about a young child watching the Olympics the other day, and then a news broadcast came on talking about this horrendous, heartbreaking event, which I just can't imagine what it's like for the families and the people of Southport. So I think we have to acknowledge as parents that children are likely to hear about it, and the best way to hear about things like this are through parents who can support the emotions, help them understand the feelings, help them understand that these events are rare and serious and sad, and sit with the feelings that the children might bring, be curious about what the child might bring, what they might be feeling. But when we avoid things and children hear elsewhere, they're less likely to feel safe and supported. It might be harder to make meaning about it. It might be harder to understand what's happened. And actually what we know about trauma and how people respond to trauma is that parents that children feel safe with can act as a buffer to the more negative effects of hearing such awful news.
So what age would you start this then? I understand if a child is of school age, they're going to potentially hear it from other children whose maybe parents have already been proactive and had that conversation with their child. But if it's preschool age, is it something that it has to be discussed?
I don't think there's a blanket black and white rule or age for anything, but I'm also aware that preschoolers will probably hear about this, particularly those that are more local to Southport. It's in the news everywhere, and obviously parents everywhere are very upset, and maybe talking about it. Little children overhear things and we can't protect them always in the way we want to. So yes, if you feel comfortable as a parent, it is fine to introduce it to your preschooler. And it's not about watching lots of news. In fact, it's about avoiding the news if you can, avoiding repetitive graphic images, but it's more about sharing something really sad and awful happened, and you might hear about it, and some children were hurt, and everybody's very upset about it. Have you heard about it, and would you like to talk about it? So you can share with younger children. You don't have to, and if they're not going to be exposed to the news, and if you're sure of that, then you don't need to as a parent. So there's no hard and fast rule. But what we do know is that if children have heard about things like this, it's helpful if parents can sit with them and make sense of their feelings about it with them.
Okay,
and to do that as parents, we need to feel comfortable talking about really horrible things.
I think that might be part of the struggle, is actually the parents themselves not breaking down and talking about it. Dr Sarah, stay with us. I'm just going to take some calls. People are calling in on this. Anthony from Southport, do you have children in your family? Is this something you've had to talk about with very young members?
Yes, I have a granddaughter and she's 5-year-old, and she knows all about it, and she asks her mum, what's happened, and one thing or another. And I attended the Atkinson Centre in Southport yesterday for the vigil, and there was so many young children there, and they'll talk to each other. And I think it's very, very important that they get the right the right information, because it'll pass around. And I think that the schools should have somebody professional explaining as to what happened.
Anthony, that's a really interesting point you make in terms of accurate information being passed to children, because when we're thinking about slightly older children who are on social media, we've seen the issues that have been caused because of misinformation, particularly in this case, and the aggravation and the horrors that have been caused because of that. So making sure they have the right information. I just want to know, Anthony, how much detail did you go into with your granddaughter, or did your daughter or son go into with your granddaughter?
It was my daughter that explained what was happening. And my daughter was deeply distressed with what's happened, as I think people all over the world are very, very upset. But she did explain to her. She's just turned 5, and she's very children are not. They're very quick. They know what's happened. She said, "Mum, what's happened?" You know, them little girls, and she knew straight away, that thing. But I think it has helped her in a lot of ways, and a lot of children, I think they should know. I think it's very, very important. And you know, on another aspect, the victims' families. I mean, my heart goes out to them. But I often think about what about the person that did this horrible crime? I feel sorry for his family because, you know, they're probably in a similar position. And I think people should understand that.
Well, you've got a lot of empathy there, Anthony, which I think is something that we need when dealing with this sort of trauma. But I'm going to go back to Dr. Sarah here. I think part of the complexity is when you've got children of different ages, how much detail to go in with each child. And is it about age or is it about the child themselves and how much information you think that child can take?
It's about tuning into the individual child and finding the words that you think they will understand. But it's not just about information sharing. It's about helping them understand the feelings associated with what's happened, helping them feel safe with you, helping them understand it was serious and it was very upsetting. And the person who's done this is now in prison or is now not a danger to others, because there will be a level of anxiety and fear, particularly, as Henry said, if it's children the same age, children who also go to dance classes. And so it's about not just sharing what happened, but being curious about how it's making a child feel, whether they're 12, whether they're 4, whether they're 16, and being open and saying, yes, it is sad and I'm finding it really sad. You can't pretend that it's not awful and you can't pretend it doesn't affect you. And I know a lot of parents are really anxious about getting it wrong, about saying the wrong thing. But as long as you're open and you listen to your child and you ask them how they're feeling, and you say, that's fine, of course you're feeling like that, I understand that, then you're going to be getting it right. There's no obvious script. It very much depends on your relationship with the child and how comfortable you feel with talking about what's gone on.
I was listening to the radio the other day and I listened to a mother talking about how her child had asked her, and I think her child was around 5 or 6, had asked her whether children can die. And that's a really horrible question for a parent to be asked, because you want to be honest, but at the same time there's a fear that you're going to take away their innocence. What would you say to a parent that is in that
the risk is if
quandary?
you're not honest, they'll find out elsewhere and they'll go, I can't trust my mum, I can't trust my dad, they're lying to me. Because sadly, children do die. And sadly, even though they're rare, events like this do happen and it's heartbreaking and it's awful. And as parents, all we want to do is protect our children. But we have to also be honest with them about how the world can be dangerous at times and how our job is to help them feel safe and look after them. But we can't protect them from everything because they will be exposed to it.
And even if you do this to the best of your abilities, is there still a chance that it could affect a child's mental health?
Well, hearing difficult things is hard, but what we know is that if we share things with children in a way that helps them feel safe and helps them make meaning of them without them going and doing that on their own and coming up with lots of things that maybe aren't true, then we're going to protect them. We're going to, it's a buffer to there being longer term traumatic experiences. So of course, I mean, I remember when I was younger and there was some IRA activity in London and there was a bombing and my parents didn't talk about anything like that. And I watched the news and I had nightmares for months, actually. I was terrified. And I think if somebody had sat with me and explained to me what was going on, I might have felt safer. It might have actually protected me from that level of anxiety.
Another question that I think a lot of parents might have, because a lot of people will be talking to their children about this tragedy, What signs are you looking for that it has affected your child in a negative way? What signs are you looking for that might think, okay, I need to do a little bit more work with my child on this situation and on their emotions?
Okay. So, I mean, of course, it will affect children in a negative way. It will make them very likely feel sad and anxious because it's a horrible thing. They will be picking up on parents' feelings as well. Emotions are contagious. And so, therefore, it's okay to expect negative feelings to come from this. Negative feelings aren't necessarily a bad thing, they're just not very pleasant. They're what happens when we hear negative news, when we feel, we all feel sad, we all feel scared. So that in itself is okay. I think if children start having sleepless nights, being really anxious of going out, then we need to keep an eye on that. We need to help them feel safer. We need to let them know we're around. We need to keep routines and predictability as best we can. I think someone before said about having some sort of purpose, about sort of giving back, about building community when things like this happen, to feel that they're not just stuck in the negative. So it's about looking out for sleeplessness, sort of regressing, being really anxious, sort of being overly clingy, whilst understanding that's all normal, unless it becomes sort of pervasive. So maybe if that's going on a lot, you'd like to seek help sort of down the line, or maybe, hopefully, and I'm sure in Southport there will be lots of trauma-focused professionals going in and supporting the local community so they can give more advice around that. But I suppose it's about acknowledging that sadness and anxiety is normal, and that's fine. It's just making sure you give children the space to express that and they feel that they can do that with you.
Okay, we're going to go back to the phones and speak to Ava from Manchester. Have you had to discuss difficult things with your children, and how did you go about it?
So my son has got ADHD, autism and sensory processing, and he's 10. And he does get super scared of, hearing things like this. And he was told the other night by a family member that there was it was really sad, there was a crazy man stabbing children in Southport. So naturally, he is beside himself at the moment. He was struggling to get to sleep tonight. I'm trying to reassure him not to worry, and this is quite a random attack, but he is beside himself.
That was probably not the best way to start that conversation. I am imagining, Sarah, that you talk about crazy men going in and stabbing children.
It wasn't myself.
No, it was a family member. I just want to hear if Sarah has any advice for you, because you're in a situation now where the conversation maybe hasn't been started in the way that you had wished that it would, and now you're having trouble with sleepless nights. And also on top of that, we have neurodivergency involved.
Yes, we do.
Absolutely, and I would rather my children didn't know. I really would. I would, but we can't protect children from some of those sort of narratives that this crazy man, stabbing people, and so therefore that's more reason for us to be the people to introduce that, and for us to be the people to say, you might hear different stories, and they might not all be true, but this is what happened, and it's very sad, and you are safe. And I'm going to make sure you're safe, but I can understand if it makes you feel wobbly and it makes you feel scared. And I'm always here to talk to you about these things. And if you hear things like crazy men going around, then please come and tell me, because it might not all be true. So I really feel for you, because you've been almost set up by this narrative and this fear being put into your child, and then that really negatively impacting him. So I'm sorry that it's been explained to him in that way. That's really hard.
But just constant reassurance there. Ava, thank you very much for that call. Zainab from London, have you had any difficult conversations with your children about tragedies in the past?
Not really, but sorry.
Sorry, Zainab,
Hello?
tell us your story.
Yes. No. I'm generally speaking, because our children, we have to explain to them. But, sometimes depend the child age and the child ability. Sometimes when you explain to the child, sometimes there is a people as well difficult with the language barrier, something like this. But my attention is, sometimes if we are building good community in our area, like coming together all the time when this like this happen, gather together, bring professional people to explain to the community and the children and the parent as well. Sometimes is find it to be difficult to understand, If you be coming together like a community, and then it is easy to explain to the children, because some children, autistic children, some of the, they have different ability. So my suggestion, sometimes you have to have good, strong community in your area, get together to know your neighbor. It is even not going to far place, even you don't know your neighbor. We have to build a good community. That's why my suggestion. I've been fostering for 20 years, so we need a strong community. That's my suggestion.
Zainab, I think it's a very good suggestion as well, and actually something that I think everyone in their own ways have brought up, that actually in such a horrific situation like this, and when tragedies like this happen, the community getting together in and of itself can be incredibly healing, and something maybe to get the children involved in so they see the positives. Dr. Sarah Mundy, thank you very much for joining us for that. Hopefully people will feel a little bit more confident going into this conversation.